Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, and here this week, a very special guest. First time here on the podcast, of course, an author. He's an associate producer. He's done it all in wrestling, really. Talk show host, you name it. The one and only, Mr. Evan Ginzburg. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you again. Been a while.
Same here. It sure has, and it's great to have you here. Let's kind of go to the very beginning. Let's start at the beginning. You know, growing up a child or even adult, teenage years, whatever it may be for you personally. First discovering pro wrestling. When did that happen for you, and who were some of your favorites growing up?
I was home on a rainy, nasty Sunday afternoon, and I'm fiddling with the UHF dial. You know, some of you guys, this is before your time. And it was very mysterious, the UHF dial. There were foreign language programs. There were PBS programs. You never knew what you were going to find. And this was before the days of, having 5,000 channels. Basically, you had CBS and NBC and ABC and a couple other channels, and then this UHF dial. So all of a sudden, I'm watching this massive guy pounding on this American Indian. And I'm like, what's going on? I didn't even know what it was. It was pro wrestling, and it was Chief Jay Strongbow. And all of a sudden, Chief Jay Strongbow does this herky-jerky, war dance comeback, and he's chopping this huge guy down. And I'm a kid. I'm like marking out. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And then I'm watching the rest of the show, and this was WWF 1972, before some of your listeners were born, some of your viewers were born. And I'm a kid, and I think it's all real. And these guys were larger than life. And they were like Marvel superheroes and supervillains come to life. And at the time, at Madison Square Garden, you were not allowed in until you were 14 years old. So when I finally turned 14, I begged my father, please take me to wrestling. So it's June 24, 1974.
Wow. That was your very first.
I walk into Madison Square Garden. I'm a kid. I'm a teenager, 14. And my first thought, I couldn't make this up. I say to myself, wow, it's in color. Because I had a black and white TV. Right. I was like Dorothy landing in Oz. I was like in awe. I was in awe. And there's the Valiant Brothers and Killer Kowalski and Nikolai Volkov. The main event was Nikolai and Blassie against Bruno and Strongbow. And Blassie had charisma off the charts. He wasn't a kid at this point. He was getting up there, and he had bad knees, but the charisma, the fans just hated this guy. And then there was the Valiant Brothers against Dean Ho and Tony Gurria. And it was amazing, 45 minutes, 2 out of 3 falls, blood. I'm a kid, and I think it's real. And you see, this is what fans today don't really understand. This was a blue-collar audience. And many of them were marks. And taking it to the next step, many of them were World War II veterans like my father. Okay, so this was 1974. World War II ended in 45. So this is only 29 years later. Okay, so you have Waldo von Erich. You have Baron von Raschke, Hans Schroeder, Tanaka, Fuji. Like, these were like their mortal enemies in World War II. These guys were shooting at them. My father was wounded on the battlefield. My father was shot on the battlefield. Yeah. So, you're a mark, and these guys are coming out doing, the foreign heel gimmick, and this stuff worked back then.
Yeah.
And what people also forget, if you watch the old James Bond movies, It was the Cold War, and we were fighting Russia. It was From Russia with Love. It was, the evil Russian heels against, James Bond or whatnot. So it all worked. And Vince McMahon Sr., he knew his audience. There was the Polish strongman Ivan Putski. There was Irish Pat Barrett. It was Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas and S.D. Jones. Every demographic was served. It was a blue-collar, multi-ethnic New York audience. And it was magic. It was just magic. And basically from 74 to 85 or so through the Heel Piper era, I went pretty much every month. The Garden, Nassau Coliseum, Westchester County Center, with a few exceptions, but for the most part, monthly for those 11 years. And once it got a little too cartoonish under Vince Jr., I became more an NWA fan and went to Philly for all the NWA shows and eventually ECW and et cetera, so on. But I've been a fan ever since. I'm still a fan. I'm not one of these old school guys who go, there's been no good wrestling since the territories. I think that's nonsense.
And, those early years for you as a fan, obviously you loved it all. You just loved the business and everything that it was. But did you have that one person where you're like, this is my guy?
Billy Graham, superstar Billy Graham.
Yeah.
He had dropped like from another planet. Nobody saw somebody like this back in the 70s. It wasn't a gym on every corner, like there is today. People didn't look like that. Between the tie-dyed and the wild outfits, the bright colors, the bleach blonde hair, basically he was a cross between Muhammad Ali and Gorgeous George, like the next generation. And Billy Graham, this guy could recite the phone book and you would be riveted. The guy, one of the all-time great talkers. And when you saw him and Bruno at the Garden, it was like Superman and Lex Luthor, Batman and the Joker, arch rivals, and the heat was off the charts. One night, they had Bruno and Billy Graham, Monsoon's the ref. Graham all of a sudden quits. He's like, I quit. And he goes back to the dressing room. Next thing you know, Monsoon has him on his shoulders, dumps him back in the ring, and it was like the Roman Colosseum. It was like this bloodlust. You could feel it. And Bruno pounces on him. And there was a roar. You never forget stuff like this. And I love Bruno, too, because Bruno was a 98-pound weakling that built himself up. And this wasn't hype. This was legit. He almost died in World War II. And, this guy. And here's another thing, okay? We would wait outside for autographs. And Bruno and Billy Graham were always nice.
Really?
Always nice. Yeah. Billy Graham. And as a kid, you're kind of getting smartened up. You're going, wow, Billy Graham's nice. And Albano's nice. And the Grand Wizard's nice. I got the Grand Wizard's autograph. And wait a second. How come Dusty Rhodes and Andre the Giant never sign our autographs? What's up with that? They don't even so much as look at us. And you're a kid and you're putting all the pieces together. All of a sudden, George Steele's talking to you in English. He's not doing the shtick. And it's like, you start to really smarten up. And standing outside the Garden was almost as fun as being inside the Garden for the matches back then. Because you met all these legends. And for the most part, I would say 90% of them was super nice. And it was great meeting them and getting their autograph. The first time I shook Bruno's hand, it's like I go home and I'm like, am I supposed to wash my hand now? Like, because, it's like you touched like, this godlike figure, it was magic. It was magic. Yeah.
That's what it was. It was larger than life back then. It had a different feel. Obviously it's changed over the years for sure, but let's talk about the 80s specifically. When it comes to managers, you had, like you mentioned, the Grand Wizard, you had Captain Louis Albano, You had Mr. Fuji as a manager towards the end of the 80s. You had, of course, Classy Freddie Blassie. You had all these larger than life managers. And even into the 90s, you had the Harvey Whipplemans and the Jim Cornettes and everybody else who came along. But I feel like the art of manager is now a lost art. And
Yeah.
what's your take on that and how we've kind of gone from so many over the top characters to barely anything?
I grew up on Lou Albano, and Albano and the Valiant Brothers. The only way I could describe it, it was like this jazz-like riff where they would play off of each other, pure improv. Johnny Valiant was a dear friend. He would say to me, they would just give us a date and the opponents. They go, August 1st, DiNucci and Pat Barrett, Philadelphia Spectrum, and boom, we would improv it. They would just all day just improv these things, play off of each other. And it was like jazz artists doing improv. And Lou Albano would get clocked before the match even started, and he would flail like a fish out of water. And the heat was off the charts. You can't imagine. And the match hasn't even started.
Yeah.
So they added to everything. The Grand Wizard was the exact opposite. He never got hit. So the fans were frustrated and they were primed and they wanted Bruno to kill his protege. So that worked also in reverse. And, I love the managers, and I think it's a big mistake how they've changed it over the years, because with exceptions, CM Punk's a great promo, MJF and AEW is a great promo, but Tony Storm is great. There's not a lot of great promos. And in WWE, where so much of it is scripted, stilted, juvenile to a certain degree, where it's geared towards 12-year-olds, you need a great heel manager, talker, especially today. A lot of the talent, they're from Mexico, they're from Japan, they're from all over the world, literally from around the world. So if you had a heel manager that could talk for them, be a mouthpiece, I think it would really add to things today. And I think they were just being chintzy because, they're paying one less guy or whatever. So they kind of phased it out almost completely. They have it a little more in AEW, but except for Heyman in WWE, I can't think of any other managers or whatever you call them.
Yeah.
You don't even call them a manager at this point.
Right. And then, of course, tag team wrestling. Let's talk about tag team wrestling. Another thing that was such a big part of the industry early on. And, you'd see all these teams that were actual tag teams. They weren't just people thrown together, although that would happen here and there, of course. But you'd see actual tag teams, and it would go on for years. And, they've kind of gotten away from that as well. You don't really see the tag teams. There are some, obviously, in both of the major leagues, but not like it used to be. What's your take in tag team wrestling and the evolution of it?
I saw
evolution of it.
I saw some of the greatest tag teams of all time. I rate the Midnight Express as the greatest tag team of all time. And again, with Cornette tremendously added to it. And if you had a Mount Rushmore, you would have to have the Road Warriors, and the Ellering added to it. So again, managers and great tag teams, go together. And, it's these teams would be together for many, many years. The Valiant Brothers ruled in the 70s, from the mid to late 70s. They went all over the world together. And eventually Jimmy Valiant came down with hepatitis, and it started to kind of fall apart. Jerry Valiant came in. And but my point is, when you have guys like the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, the Fantastics, the Freebirds, of course, these were great, great tag teams that stuck together for the longest time. And, even in the 70s, the Hollywood Blondes, Jerry Brown and Buddy Roberts. Buddy Roberts became a Freebird. They were doing the three-man thing. But Gordman and Goliath, very underrated in LA. Great tag team. But these guys would go all over the territories together. The Assassins, even going back to the 60s, the Interns with Dr. Ken Ramey, the Medics. I loved great tag teams. And when they would have the Valiant Brothers against Bruno and Strongbow on top at the Garden, time and time again, the building would shake. And there's no pyro, no music, no nothing, just on the charisma of these guys.
Yeah.
And back then, a lot of times it was 2 out of 3 bloody falls. It wasn't just a 1 fall quickie like you'll sometimes get today. So when you had a 1 fall apiece, every pin was exciting because you didn't know how it was. Today the fans are smart. This team's getting a bigger push, and this team's leaving. A lot of times you know who's going to win or lose, but back then you didn't know, and it was really an incredible experience. And speaking of great tag teams, Piper and Orton, oh my God, those guys. When you saw Roddy Piper live, solo or in a tag team with Orton, the best way to explain it, heel Piper, much better than when he turned face. He'd come into the ring, and 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes later, you could breathe again. That's how exciting it was. You would go, because it was carnage. It was chaos. It was like controlled chaos. You didn't know from 1 second to the next what Piper was going to hit the guy with, what he was going to do, the eye poke. Heel Piper was amazing, just amazing. And Orton was very underrated. That guy, he could brawl, he could wrestle, he could do it all, Bob Orton. And the Samoans were great also.
Yeah.
The Samoans, again, a lot of the fans were Mark's early 80s. And, we half thought like these guys were indestructible,
Right.
to the point where Afa and Sika both got title shots with Backlund. That's how over they were at the Garden.
Yeah.
They got title shots solo. So these were great. The Blackjacks were a great team, but they weren't in WWF all that long. Blackjacks were great. In other areas, Patterson and Stevens was a great team. Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens was a great team. And over the years, as a radio host, I'm senior editor over at ProWrestlingStories.com. I've interviewed tons and tons of legends, and a lot of young people don't realize this, but many of the legends have said that prime Ray Stevens, 1960s, 1970s Ray Stevens, was the greatest of all time. Wow. The greatest of all time. A lot of legends say that. Yeah. He slowed down considerably. He was a wild man, partier. He got into car wrecks and boat accidents. He was, he lived every day to the fullest, for better and worse. But a young Ray Stevens, a lot of people, they just greatest of all time. And they also held guys like Kowalski and Thez. Bruno had a lot of respect. A lot of the fans don't quite get it. They'll go, oh, guys like Bruno and Pedro and Billy Graham, they just punched and kicked, but they didn't understand the charisma. They were like gods to us, half gods to us. That's the only way to explain it.
Well, it was storytelling back then, and you could literally spend 5, 10, 15 minutes just working the crowd, without doing moves.
And Zbyszko used to do that.
Yeah.
And his heel turn on Bruno, that was incredible. Spiros Arion's heel turn on Bruno was amazing. I mean, they sold out the Garden 3 cards in a row, 3 months in a row. And for Triple H and the suits at WWE, to do Vince took it out of bingo halls, and they would sell out Madison Square Garden and the accompanying Felt Forum which had another 4,000 to 5,000 seats. There were 26, 27,000 people in there
Right.
for sellouts on certain nights. So it wasn't all bingo halls. They were selling out major, major arenas up and down the East Coast. Did Vince make it bigger than it was? Vince Jr.? Sure. But, let's not, rewrite history. It wasn't all in high school gyms and VFWs and,
Yeah. Yeah, Bruno Sammartino sold out MSG famously, over 100 times easy. And, back then when you're packing an arena like that, there was no Titantron covering half of the arena or a quarter of the arena. It was all fans. So
Oh,
very,
yeah.
very impressive at that
They
time.
used to list it as 22,092 as a sellout at the Garden. Whether it was exaggerated or not, whether there were comps or not, I don't know. But there were a lot of people in there. It wasn't sectioned off like you're saying. Yeah.
And what's your take on that? The exaggeration of numbers, like WrestleMania 3, for instance. What's your take? There are different stories. What do you think we're actually there for an event like that?
I think they exaggerated. It benefits them. It's the hottest ticket in town. It's the hottest ticket in sports, blah, blah, blah. But now it's like the new math when they're charging obscene amount of money for a WrestleMania where it's, close to $1,000 for 2 days in the nosebleeds. I don't agree with it. And then they go, oh, we had a record-breaking gate. Yeah, because you greedily, jacked up the prices. I'm not impressed that it's a record-breaking gate. Then you have the fawning media at these press scrums applauding that they broke the gate. And you got guys who, have to look their kids in the eye and go, I can't afford to take you to a WWE show anymore. I'm sorry. That's not a positive. It's so numbers tend to lie, and liars tend to lie, and corporate vultures tend to lie. I'm not a big fan of the all-encompassing greed today, and you shouldn't have to tell your kid, "I'm sorry, son or daughter. We can't do this anymore." Madison Square Garden has a Raw coming up. Ringside is 2,000 plus. Ringside. We used to call that a TV taping. They used to let people in for free for TV tapings. Okay?
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And on top is $122. So do the math. Let's say mom and dad and 2 kids, $122 minimum times 4 plus food and merch and parking, however you get to the place.
Yeah.
You're talking, so here's the difference. In the Backlund era, Bruno, Pedro, you would have 12 to 14 garden cards a year. Now you have 3 or 4 or 5. Now it's a birthday present, a graduation present, a Christmas present. They usually run the garden right around Christmas because the average family, they can't do this every month. I know guys who are telling me, grown adults, they're telling me, I went to WrestleMania, not me. They're telling me they went to WrestleMania last year and they can't afford to go again. They're still paying off the credit cards from last year.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where it's not a blue collar thing anymore. So I tell people, go support indies. You'll be treated like a valued customer. You'll be treated almost like family. You meet the wrestlers. It's a whole different experience. You walk up to John Cena at a show and he scribbles his name for $425 or whatever. It's like, to me, it's disgusting.
Yeah. Now, basically, growing up a fan in the 70s and being able to experience 70s to present day, what is your favorite era of pro wrestling?
Without a doubt, mid to late 80s when WWF was on fire. Not that I liked all the changes, but Piper, Orton, heel Sergeant Slaughter transitioning into face Sergeant Slaughter, Slaughter and the Sheik, those boot camp matches. Morocco was unbelievable. I was there the night Morocco and Snooker had the cage match.
Oh, wow.
I was there when Tiger Mask wrestled Dynamite Kid. I believe that was 82. That was a little earlier.
Were you there for Slaughter and Patterson?
Not for the boot camp. I missed that one, unfortunately. Of all the ones to miss, that I missed. But I saw them in the previous month. They had a regular match, which was great too, but not on the level of the boot camp match, which I saw on video. But that was a great era. And then, like I said, I started going to the NWA in Philly mostly. They also ran Nassau Coliseum in Baltimore, but I wasn't there quite as often. Philly, I was there monthly. They had mid-card WWF headliners like Jimmy Valiant, Superstar Billy Graham. Yeah. They were so talent-laden. Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, Road Warrior, Koloff and the Russians, the Four Horsemen, Flair on Top, Flair Wrestling Dusty, Wyndham, Magna. It was unbelievable, the talent that the NWA had that era. And the last great NWA year was 89 when you had the Flair Steamboat Series, which was unbelievable, just unbelievable. Wrestling elevated to art. So I would easily say the mid to late 80s was the greatest era. And people are shocked when I say this. The one I loved after that was Ring of Honor in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Nigel McGuinness and Bryan Danielson, that was Dory Funk Jack Briscoe level. That was Flair Steamboat level. The fact that they didn't get the same, showcase, that not as many people saw it, is a shame, because those were unbelievable matches, unbelievable cards. And again, half those guys are WWE main eventers now. Kevin Steen is Kevin Owens. Tyler Black is Seth Rollins. Claudio eventually went to WWE. He's in AEW now. But a ton of those ROH stars became huge WWE stars.
Yeah.
And Bryan Danielson became WWE champion.
Yep.
I mean,
CM Punk, Samoa Joe.
Yeah, CM Punk. Yeah. So Triple H got the genius tag when he brought all those guys to NXT, but ROH and other indie promotions really built those guys. These guys were stars before they came to NXT.
Yeah. So chiming in your inner fan, if you had to put together a Mount Rushmore, like you mentioned, for tag team wrestling, any era, what would that be?
Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, Road Warriors, Valiant Brothers. Easy. If you're a New Yorker from the 70s, the Valiants were the number one tag team in the world. They go back, it's 50 years now. A lot of fans don't realize. And the same thing, they just punched and kicked. They weren't great wrestlers. The heat was off the charts. People have no idea. Yeah. No idea. And here's another thing that people don't realize in wrestling. Some of the greatest heels were funny. Funny. The Valiant Brothers, Albano, Piper, Morocco. It's like they made you laugh and you wanted to murder them. Yeah. As mock fans. And that's an art, believe me. That's John Tolis out in LA mostly. That guy could talk and make you laugh, And Tolis came into New York in '74 to wrestle Bruno. He was hot on LA TV. We got them in New York, the LA TV weekly. And Tolis gets on the WWF tapings, and he's calling Bruno a spaghetti bender. Spaghetti bender. This was like a big insult in 1974. It was like an ethnic slur. So all the Italian fans wanted to kill John Tolos because he was insulting their hero. Funny stuff.
And he was brought back many years later as a manager, right? As coach?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm working on a book on Tolis's life, along with Dr. Mike Lano. And Tolis was mortified by that whole experience because they would not let him talk. They said, just blow the whistle. One of the greatest promo guys in history. Vince gets this, Vince Jr. gets this genius tag, but man, sometimes he messed up a lot of great, great wrestlers, and he jobbed out a lot of, great, great wrestlers. Like Don Kanoodle was an NWA tag champ, and in WWF he did nothing.
Right.
And a lot of these guys, Al Perez, and a lot of these guys were big stars in the NWA, and Vince brought them in. It's like if they weren't 10 feet tall with 24-inch arms, it's like it didn't work for Vince, a lot of these guys.
And like Coach, I always thought that Baron von Raschke was an odd choice for Powers of Pain for that short period of time.
I don't.
He wore the cloak, and he didn't really cut any promos. Really, he was just kind of
there. I didn't get it. And like I said, Johnny Valiant was a dear friend and a great, great talker.
Yeah.
And he always said to me, he said, they called me into the office, and they never told me why I was let go. They never gave me a reason. Brutal business, because Johnny had left wrestling and had a day job with benefits and a pension. And after he left wrestling, he lost his home.
Wow.
And a lot of ECW guys lost their home. They were not getting paid, much, if anything, the last few months at ECW. So, it could be an ugly, brutal business. And all of a sudden, you're on TV one day and next day you're gone. And let me add this. There's a whole generation of guys who never broke $100,000 in a year. Never. A lot of these top heels, before the WrestleMania era, the headliners did okay back then. But again, it's math. The math is deceiving. So top guys like Nikolai were pulling in $400,000 a year. But if you're working 300 plus days a year, it's not a windfall.
Yeah.
And you're supporting your family back home, and you're, eating 3 meals a day, gas, tolls, everything else, hotels, motels. It's not the windfall that it sounds like. And Nikolai said to me, he was also a dear friend. He said to me, Evan, I was so tired once, I fell asleep with my eyes open. I didn't know that was possible.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah. They would crisscross continents, not just the country, during that mid-'80s boom. Barry Windham, there's a famous shoot interview. He said I wrestled like 89 straight days. He said I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go home. Terry Funk, the same thing. He says I can't do this anymore. If you're 21, it's a little different than if you're 41. You're crisscrossing. They basically left a trail of corpses. I mean, a ton of guys died that era, and they were scared to lose their spot if they wrestled. They were wrestling hurt. They would just bandage it. I'll tell you the craziest story of all time, and this is not a commonly told story. Johnny Valiant told me this face to face. He said the Valiant brothers were having a match. Jimmy pulls out the blade, accidentally nicks Johnny in the eye, the eyeball.
Oh.
Not the eye area, the eyeball. Johnny's wrestling blind in one eye. Okay. Here's the punchline. The next night they had another main event. And again, these guys are scared to take off. He's wrestling blind the next night in one eye.
Oh my gosh.
Finally, he's like, this isn't getting better. I can't see out of one eye. So he calls up Vince. He calls up, Vince Sr. at the time. He goes, I need to get to an eye doctor. This is dangerous. And they gave him the day off. But back then, it's like, they didn't care what was wrong. You showed up and you wrestled, boy.
Yeah.
And, Vince Sr. gets this like saint-like reputation, but he didn't spread the money around, and if you know the whole Bruno story, they blacklisted Bruno,
Right.
early in his career. So it was a ruthless business back then. It's better today for the stars. On the indies, you could still work for nothing. And I've had indie guys tell me they've had a dozen, 15, 16 concussions, and they're getting paid next to nothing or nothing. So there's still real discrepancies. And then you got Roman Reigns. He wrestled 3 times last year, and he's making millions. That's a big difference.
Not a bad gig. Now, when it comes to ECW, you mentioned ECW. Of course, around 94, they would turn into Extreme Championship Wrestling. How influential do you think that they were as far as the evolution of pro wrestling goes?
Oh, very much so. I went to a lot of early ECW. I went to Joe Goodhart's show, Tri-State, which was basically the predecessor to ECW. Those were star-studded shows. Heyman knew early on it was Eddie Gilbert who was the booker in ECW, and those were great shows too. But it hadn't peaked yet.
Right.
Close friend of mine is Chris Michaels, who was an early ECW tag champ under Eddie Gilbert. Now Heyman takes over, and all of a sudden it's getting TV and pay-per-views, and it's blowing up. And I liked more, as an old school fan, like Eddie Guerrero against Dean Malenko. To me, that was art. Yeah. It became almost like the law of diminishing values. Now it's 3 tables they're going through, and the tables are on fire. It's like, how do you top this? It became almost numbing to a degree. It's like they took it as far as they could take it. And unfortunately, all these crazy gimmick matches with tables and ladders and all of this, all of a sudden everybody was copying it because of the ECW influence. And WWE is a $1 billion corporation. Could you think of any other $1 billion corporation that would encourage their employees to fall off a ladder? Right. Think about it. I don't care how big you are, how strong you are, you're not meant to fall off of large ladders and such. It's not good for the human body.
Yeah.
And my wrestler friends will say to me, there's only so many bumps on your bump card, meaning at some point your knee's going to go out, your shoulder, your elbow, your joints, your back, whatever the case may be. It's so ECW made for a wilder, arguably more exciting product. I rate Terry Funk and Sabu matches that I saw live among the greatest matches I ever saw. Incredible. But Sabu died young. Relatively, was he 61? That's not an old age in this day and age. So, it all takes its toll. And Sabu had a hip replacement. And he didn't get rich from this business. A lot of guys after him did, copying him, but he didn't get rich from pro wrestling. So, ECW had, like everything else, a good side and a bad side. And the expectation that major promotions are going to have, guys falling off of ladders and leaping off of cages and falling off of high objects and jumping off of high objects. Eventually, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And many times when these guys are older, I've had wrestlers say to me, honestly, they go, Evan, I'm always in pain. I'm always in pain because of all the crazy bumps and stunts and falls. And, Ivan Koloff, who's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. You talk Mount Rushmore of foreign heels. I understand he was Canadian, but a great foreign heel that he played. So at the end, Koloff was bent over and arthritic, and he would take these crazy bumps. Bruno would throw him in the air. Yeah, he'd just fly in the air and land on his back. This is not conducive to good age and longevity. It's Terry Funk. He was running on fumes. As great as he was, his knees were shot. It was, you can only abuse yourself so much, and ECW was part of that, unfortunately. I mean, I'm not going to take away that they had some great matches, and I love a good brawl as much as anybody. I would go see the Gangsters and Public Enemy, and I loved it. But, what happened to these guys? One of the four are alive. Three aren't. It's not a good sign.
Right. Yeah. Now, you've worn many hats in the wrestling industry. Let's go there's one of them. Let's go to the very beginning for you. What was your first job in wrestling, and when was that?
I was a school teacher, and I was a statistic because the average teacher with kids lasts 4 years, and I lasted 3.5. I said, bye, kids. Have a nice Christmas. They're still waiting for me. This was like 40 years ago. So to make a long story short, I was out of work for a while, and I started a newsletter, Wrestling Then and Now. And the newsletter had a long run. I mean, it never made big money like the Observer or the Torch or any of those, but it had a nice long run. And because of it, you made various contacts. And next thing I knew, I was invited to do radio on a 50,000 watt station in New York, WBAI-FM 99.5. And this was not a wrestling show. This was an art show. And we just happened to love wrestling. So all of a sudden, we're calling Lou Thez, Killer Kowalski, Koloff. This is an amazing story. Art Barr was on the show, and then he suddenly died. And then we had Eddie Guerrero on the show, and Eddie Guerrero was sobbing. I'll never forget it. I had Sherry Martel on the show, etc. So on. I mean, the biggest names, and some in studio, many over the phone. And it was a great experience. And so one night, Johnny Valiant's actually in studio. He was local. This was in Manhattan, and he was living in Manhattan. And he would come down to the studio, and he says to me, "Why don't you book me?" And I said, "I've never booked anybody." He says, "As an agent." I said, "I'm a school teacher, who happens to do radio and newsletters, but I'm really a school teacher." So I'm thinking about it, and this was one of my childhood heroes, and just the idea of working with him, creatively, because he wanted to do stand-up comedy and movies, not just wrestling. He was still working indies as a wrestler, but he was winding down for the most part. I'll tell you a funny Johnny Valiant indie wrestling story real quick.
Yeah.
So one night he's wrestling Snuka, and he's the heel and Snuka's the face, New Jersey indie. And Johnny pulls out his New York City Metro card. and he swipes it across Jimmy's eyes, and Jimmy sells it like he's blinded. Okay. And so Johnny got like a big chuckle out of that. So Jimmy's about to do the leap, and he whispers to Johnny, "Roll out of the ring, let the manager take it." Because Johnny was getting up there in age, So Jimmy splashes this indie manager. I don't remember the kid's name. So after the match, Johnny's chuckling about the Metro card. But here's the sad part of the story. Okay, so we're about to get paid, and the promoter does the old, "Well, guys, it was a lighthouse," and it wasn't. Every seat was full, and they got a good match, and the fans left happy. "Can you take a little less?" And I go, "Listen, you're only paying him $350. And at his age, he came out. He did his part. He did his part. Okay. I said, pay him what you promised him. Pay him what you promised him. And we stood our ground, and he got his money, and they never booked him again. Like somehow this was reversed. He was the bad guy. Can you imagine? And this happened many, many times. So I'm like I said, I'm a school teacher, but suddenly I'm like the muscle. Pay my guy.
Yeah.
It's the good, the bad, and the ugly of pro wrestling. I wrote a whole book on this. It's called Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. I tell 100 stories. Some of these stories are in there, and many, many others. And yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful business, and it's an ugly business. And I'm sure as a promoter, you've experienced it all also.
Absolutely.
Some talent is wonderful, and some talent, it's a nightmare. I've been there.
Yeah. I remember Scott Putsky. I had him booked in 2013, actually one of the shows that you did for me. And he was on our super ticket, and some fans were excited because he's an obscure name. He doesn't do much. So, people were pretty excited, and called him up because he hadn't arrived at the airport, and he was on his way to, I think it was Hawaii or something. And I just kind of no-sold it and played it off. Oh, I thought your event was in a couple weeks or something, And yeah, I mean, that happens every once in a while. You just get people that aren't ready to do business. And luckily in the wrestling industry, 80, 90% of the time, everybody's great. And there's a lot of great people in the industry, but you always have the few that just don't want to play.
Well, you learn, it's a pretty closed business where it's like 6 degrees of separation. Everybody knows everybody. So eventually you hear, this guy's great. He's fan friendly. He's reliable. He's a pleasure to deal with. He's honest to the penny. And then there's other guys you hear, you better avoid him. You don't know if he's going to be high. You don't know if he's going to be drunk. You don't know if he's going to be hostile to the fans. It's not like a secret with a lot of these guys. And I still do agent work occasionally. I kind of pick my spots because over the years, you kind of burn out on it. Scott Epstein, I'm sure you dealt with him. He was a great guy. He was a good friend. He died in a car wreck about a decade ago. And he said to me, there's 3 scenarios as an agent. You make money, you break even, or you lose money. And 2 of the 3, as a vendor or an agent, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Or as a promoter, there's 3 scenarios: make money, break even, or lose money. 2 of the 3 are not good.
Right.
It's a tough business. So I'm at a point where it's got to be a talent that I really like and know, and they're reliable, it's comfortable. It's not, 14 hours away. My wife just flew to Korea, 14 and a half hours. It's got to be easy because many times you're not going to make much money, if any. Yeah. So sometimes it's a long trip home when you lose money.
Yeah, exactly. And for the viewers that aren't familiar with Scott Epstein, why don't you kind of throw that out there and tell us all about him and your memories with him.
Scott Epstein was one of the top agents in the wrestling business. Honorable, honest, and I met a lot of great people through him. I met Billy Graham and guys like that, and Scott booked basically everybody, and everybody loved the guy. And he was an educator. He worked in the school system also, and just a good guy. And one night he had some family issue, and he got a call like 1 a.m, and he dashes out, and he's driving over to play peacemaker or whatever. And he died in a horrible car wreck. And I went to his memorial. There were 800 people. 800 people at the memorial. Now, I'm not going to say they were all wrestling people, but there were many. And you'll hear stories about guys like Pedro Morales, who, when he died, there was a handful of wrestling people at the funeral. It's in wrestling, it's kind of like you're forgotten sometimes. So when you have 800 people show up at your funeral, you meant a lot to a lot of people. And Scott was a great guy. I miss him. I miss a lot of people. Nicole Bass was a dear friend. Melissa Coates, Nikolai, Lanny Poffo used to sleep on my couch when I booked them. Lanny Poffo was also very health conscious, like Nikolai.
Yeah.
But this is another thing that I tell people. You're on the road 300 plus days a year. Back in the day, 300 plus days. We did a movie 350 days. I was an associate producer on it. Yeah. And where did we get that title from? The NWA champs literally wrestled 350 days a year. How is that conducive to a marriage, to your health, to your sanity? I mean, you're in a different time zone, different nights or whatever. You don't know where you are half the time. It's not conducive to a long life. So think about it. You probably couldn't name on two hands wrestlers who are alive in their 80s. I don't know if you can name 10 guys. I mean, Black Gordman's alive.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of guys in their 80s.
No, it's definitely not.
Not a healthy business.
Yeah.
So, So I was an agent, still am, and one day I have Nikolai and Johnny Valiant booked for an appearance, and we're sitting there, and it's always fun with those guys. They were great guys, funny, warm, fan friendly, and all of a sudden, a gentleman walks up to us and he says, "Did you ever hear of Darren Aronofsky?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a big film buff. I saw Requiem for a Dream and Pi, 3.14, not PIE." So I said, I saw all his films. I'm a fan. And he says, "Darren's working on a wrestling project and you guys would be perfect." So we exchanged cards. I don't hear from the guy for like 6 months. And I kind of forgot about it. And then all of a sudden, Aronofsky's office calls and he says, "Let's all meet. Bring whoever you want." So I bring to the meeting Nikolai's shoot manager, Nikita Brezhnikov, who used to book him on the Indies and all of this. Tiger Khan, who's also gone. He wrestled in Calgary for the Hearts. And Johnny Valiant and myself. And we go to meet them. And for hours, Johnny and Nikolai are just telling them stories like I'm telling you today. And they're just like rolling. I mean, these crazy stories about the wrestling business. And I knew it went well. But again, months went by. Aronofsky was working on other projects. And all of a sudden, they call me for a meeting. And they said, "We'd like to offer you the associate producer role for the movie," which meant I was the wrestling guy, not the money guy. That's the executive producer.
Right.
I was the wrestling guy. So, I brought in the ring, Mickey's stunt double. I did half dozen casting calls, brought in Ron Killings and Romeo Roselli and all these guys. A lot of those guys in the locker room scene I brought in, or eventually Alpha brought in some of his guys also. Alpha was training Mickey. And the whole thing was a magical experience, one of the great experiences of my life. And we spent 7 years off and on this project. 7 years. 6 years on 350 days. People don't realize, they're so used to WWE and Dark Side of the Ring pumping out, programs. But that wasn't the wrestler. You know, the
Sure.
wrestler was a different level for the most part. And
And who else was in The Wrestler? You had Paulie Normus in the background there. You had Andrew Anderson.
Yeah, a lot of these guys were office guys. Yeah, you know, it's so long. It's 18 years now. Papa Don, he was one of the guys in the locker room.
Yeah.
He's a great indie wrestler. He should have gotten a shot in WWE or AEW, because a lot of it is ageism. These guys hit a certain age, and you know, like they're saying now with what's his name, the guy that was just in AEW who went into WWE. Oh my God, he's 41 years old. You know, what's his name? The big muscle guy,
black guy who just debuted in the Rumble.
Yeah.
Powerhouse.
Yeah, Powerhouse Hobbs. They gave him a new WWE name. I can't think of it. So they're like, oh my God, he's 41 years old. So you know, there's a lot of ageism. Papa Don was as good as anybody in the big leagues. He should have got his shot, but you hit a certain age, they kind of lose interest. So anyway, we're working on The Wrestler, and finally it's in the can. We're at the New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center, 2,300 seats, sold out, $40 a ticket. And I'm sitting in the audience, and all of a sudden it's the scene with Randy the Ram and his daughter. And he says to her, I'm just a broken down piece of meat. And I just don't want you to hate me. And I look around and everybody's crying. Everybody's crying. And I go, wow, it works. It works. You can't fake crying. It works.
Yeah.
And we walked out of there, spontaneous standing ovation, paparazzi, everybody's interviewing us. It was, I tell people, it was the greatest night of my life. New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center. And the film, you know, blew up and, you know, made $36 million domestic. And, you know, we shot that on $6 million, which is a small indie film. That would be like the food budget on a Marvel superhero movie today.
Right.
You know, $6 million for the whole movie.
Yeah.
None of us got rich from it. And, but man, 100 years from now, people will watch that for Mickey's performance. It was tremendous, tremendous performance. And
any memories working with Mickey?
Yeah, I never saw him say no for an autograph. I never saw him say no for a picture from a fan. Couldn't be any nicer. He actually got hurt training. That's how dedicated he was to it. Except for like jumping off the top rope or whatnot. That was him in the ring, you know?
Yeah.
There was a stunt double for the riskiest stuff because you don't want your star crippled, but most of it, that was him. And so one night, for about 6 months prior to the filming, we shot it in 35 days, 7 5-day weeks. And we go to CZW, Cage of Death. This was funny. And they invite us backstage, and it's like a MASH unit. These guys went through panes of glass. It was insane. And they're getting stitched up. There's blood everywhere. So I said to Mickey, what'd you think of all this? Am I allowed to curse on your show?
Yeah.
So I said to Mickey, what do you think? And he goes, it was fucking wild. He's like a legit tough guy. He was boxing. He left acting to box for a while. He wasn't, here's a guy who's on red carpets at the Oscars, the Emmys, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And he loves CZW, Cage of Death. So this is another memory with him. So, we did the film festival circuit after it was finally made. So one night I walk up to him and I go, what did you think of the movie? And he says to me, quote, I can't watch it. It reminds me of my own life. That's this guy was top box office 1980s. Dinah, what was it, 8.5 weeks, 9.5 weeks.
Hmm.
He one hit after another in the 80s. He was a top guy. And by 2008, his star had waned. And, we wanted to get 18 million to do the film. I was at all the financing meetings, and we could only get 6 million because his name wasn't what it was. But once the film came out and the reviews were just glowing for him and the film, it made the film successful. But it's a tough business. His real payday, he did not make a lot of money for the wrestler. It was really, he was hot off the wrestler. Then he did Iron Man 2, I believe it was. He was the heel in Iron Man 2, and he got $1 million for that. Yeah. That was really his payoff for the wrestler. And I have a piece on him in Pro Wrestling Stories that I wrote recently. It was an honor. Oh, here's another funny story. So I'm on the set one day, and I'll backtrack a little. So for about 6 months, I'm taking these guys to wrestling events, wrestling matches, and I took them to this convention. And conventions, you do conventions.
Yeah.
So we're out in Jersey, and it's like the WWE Hall of Fame. Moolah, Mae Young, Tony Atlas, Lou Albano, Johnny Valiant. I mean, it was like all these guys. Nikolai, Sheik, Iron Sheik, and there's nobody there. There's like 40 people there. It was sad. It was so bad that Sheik's head was down on the table asleep. That's how dead it was. There were more wrestlers and vendors than actual fans. And Aronofsky, who's a good guy, his mom was a school teacher, and regular kid, not a rich kid. Aronofsky kept going, Evan, where is everybody? Where is it? Because to him, these were huge stars, because he was an 80s wrestling fan like we were. So where is everybody? And I had the screenwriter with us also. And I was helping with the scripts, not writing the scripts, but checking that the wrestling content was authentic.
Sure.
So, for example, backtrack again. In the original script, Randy the Ram is blading himself, and all the wrestlers are watching. And I said, nobody would be watching. It's just another day at the office. Nobody would care one bit. The wrestler's blading himself. It's every night of the week back then. Yeah. So I take him to this convention, and I get the next version of the script, the latest version. And all of a sudden, that autograph scene is in the script. It's in the script.
Wow.
And
so it really had an impact on him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so I'm standing on the set. This is months later, and we're about to film that scene. And a lot of the merch in that scene was mine, as a vendor. Yeah. And we first Aronofsky says, does it look authentic? I said, no, it's too neat and tidy. I said that every inch of those tables should be filled with merch. It shouldn't be this neat and antiseptic. So all of a sudden I'm doing set design. This is an indie show. Like everybody just indie movie. Everybody just pitches in.
Yeah.
So I'm standing there, and all of a sudden Aronofsky gets this smirk, and he goes, Evan, come here. I go, yeah. And he goes, I want you to walk up to all the wrestlers in the scene, walk up to Mickey Last, ask him for an autograph and a Polaroid. I've never acted in my life. I'm in street clothes like this, no makeup, no nothing. And next thing I know, there's giant cameras in my face. There's 125 people looking, and I'm acting. So there were two actual wrestlers in that scene. And I don't know if anybody even realizes. One was Manny Yarborough, who was a black sumo, 800 pounds. He worked for UFC. He was a friend of mine. And Johnny Valiant, without the bleached blonde hair. Those were the rest were all extras. So I'm about to do this scene, and I'm nervous because I've never acted. Mickey walks over to me and whispers in my ear. He goes, "Just improv it. Just improv. Like it's the most natural. I never did a high school play. Nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I walk up to Manny Yarborough, and Manny was a friend. So now I'm like, now I'm a little more relaxed. What's up? How you doing? You know. So I did exactly what they told me. I walk up to Mickey, and the whole time I'm thinking, what am I going to say? Because we're improving it. So I'm thinking, what would I say to a legendary wrestler from my childhood? And I go, I loved you as a kid. I saw you at Madison Square Garden. Can I have your autograph? And he looks at me, and he's improving, and he goes, what's your name? So now I'm thinking, and just instinctively, I go, Evan. Now, how surreal this is. I'm playing myself in a fictional movie. How utterly surreal this is. Okay. And I had no idea if I made the cut or whatever. And again, I'm at the film festival at Lincoln Center, New York Film Festival. All of a sudden, that scene comes on. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she's looking at the screen. She's looking at me. She's looking at the screen. She goes, "That's you," because it's just surreal. The whole thing. It's bizarre.
Wow.
Because the day before I'm a school teacher, standing in front of students, and now I'm on a screen in front of 2,300 people at one of the biggest film festivals in the world. And a friend of mine said to me, and it's true. He said, that was Aronofsky's gift to you, because that's a little piece of forever. That movie will always be there. And when and people will watch it 100 years from now, when we're all gone, because of Mickey's performance. Yeah. It's that great that people will watch this 100 years from now. So I just was very moved by the whole experience. And at the wrap party, it's almost like summer camp where everybody parts ways because it's over. The film's done. I'll never forget it. Aronofsky's doing a little speech in this New York club, and we're all there. And he goes, quote, "I don't know what the fuck we have, but we have something." Because you don't know how a film's going to perform. You never know. And it was one of the great experiences of my life. And I chronicle a lot of the behind the scenes stuff in my book that I just wrote. And it's important to create art, not to create content.
Yeah.
WWE has pumped out 40 movies or whatever. If 5 of them are worthwhile, it's a lot, Right. Ironically, there's a WWE movie that's not a wrestling movie and not an action movie. Ed Harris is the star, and he plays a gay teacher. I forget the name. Randy Orton's in it.
Oh, okay.
Randy Orton's in it, but it's not their typical fan. That was a very good movie. I forget the name, though, but it failed miserably at the box office, unfortunately, because their audience expects, wrestling or shoot 'em ups. But
right, I'm looking it up right now.
That's What I Feel or something. I forget the title, but Ed Harris was the star. Excellent film.
That's What I Am.
That's What I Am. Yeah. Excellent. But I guess when it flopped at the box office, they figure, let John Cena shoot somebody or whatever. Let Randy Orton shoot somebody.
Right.
But
what were some of the locations that the wrestler was filmed at?
It was mostly in Jersey.
Okay.
It was a legitimate strip club. I forget the name of it. And it was a legitimate supermarket. And we had low budget. It was guerrilla filmmaking. We went where we could do it cheaply. The vast majority of those fans in those wrestling scenes, those were real fans. Those were not extras for the most part. Wow. You could see me and Scott Epstein in some of those scenes, but you got to fill up the seats, And yeah, it was mostly legit places. We The finale was at an actual Ring of Honor card where Randy gets the heart attack, and the screenwriter said to me, because fans always ask, does he die? Does he not die? And the screenwriter said to me, um, if he doesn't die there, he's going to die in the ring because it's the only place he's at home. It's the only place he functions. He cannot function in the real world. So it's either a yes, he dies there, or he's going to die on the next card or the card after.
Right.
Basically, that's the way the screenwriter presented it, and yeah, it was an incredible experience, and basically, I just want to continue to write books and make documentaries and make movies and create art, because when you're gone, that's your legacy. And we it's the fact that I've seen lists of the greatest sports films of all time, and The Wrestler is on some of these lists.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking 125 years of, American and world cinema. So it's meaningful that when you do something that's, you can pump out content every day, every night of the week if you want to. But, if you make something that's going to stand the test of time, then it's special. And I compare Mickey's performance in The Wrestler to Brando in On the Waterfront, when Brando says, I could have been a contender. Yeah. That's like Mickey talks to his daughter, I'm just a broken down piece of meat. It's an iconic line and an iconic scene, and it's going to live forever. So, yeah.
And going back to Nicole Bass, why don't you share some memories of your friend Nicole and what it was like working with her?
Nicole was a wonderful, wonderful person. And big heart, funny, always the life of the party. Just a good person, and almost like a big kid. She, we brought her to your convention, in fact.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. She, her husband had a bad heart, and he passed before she did. And she was kind of lost, She was kind of lost.
His name was Bob, right?
Bob, yeah. Bob ran a gym, and they knew each other from the bodybuilding world. And Bob was a good guy also. So I would sit and have lunch with Nicole. We were basically neighbors. We lived not far from each other in Queens, New York. And she would say to me, I'd say, hey, Nicole, I'm having a birthday party or whatever. You want to come? And she's like, Evan, I don't feel like being Nicole tonight. The fans do the Howard Stern shtick. Are you really a guy? And all of this stuff. And she would sit in the diner and put on makeup. And she'd say to me, I like to look girly sometime. She said, I love Howard Stern, but sometimes it's exhausting. It's exhausting, she would say, being Nicole Bass. And so her husband dies, and she had pancreatitis. I had to do a reading for The Wrestler. Aronofsky wanted her. She was so deathly ill, she couldn't make it the day he was shooting the scene. And I get a call. She's in the hospital, and she's lying there with tubes sticking out of her, and she's brain dead. Brain dead. So her friends are saying to me, Evan, tell Nicole to wake up. And I'm not a doctor, but I'm looking at this, this is not good. And she died the next morning. I was literally there. I was there the night before. I was at her deathbed, and we were very close. And she was larger than life, literally, figuratively, a lot of fun. And you talk to any of the ECW team, they loved her. They loved her. And she was there the night Owen Hart died. She was on that card. And she was on after he plummeted. And she said to me, he was blue. He was blue. And I knew he was dead. And they told us to go out. They pressured us to go out and perform. She said I was sitting there sobbing, and they pressured us. I walked out there in a fog. You wonder why I have mixed emotions towards WWE, WWF. Because I hear, I'm sure you do too, you hear from the legends themselves what they were subjected to in many cases. And I'm not going to say it's all bad. Vince Jr. had his good list. Guys like Blassie had a job for life. And, they took care of certain people, and other people, they were just banished for the most part. For whatever reason. And but can you imagine this guy plummeted? He was blue. They didn't stop the card. They continued the card with performers who weren't. Wrestling's a dangerous business. And she told me she got a concussion that night on top of it. She was walking around in a daze. Her friend was wheeled past her.
Right.
So, that's Nicole. She was a good person, sweetest person. And she would always, it's funny. I'm sure you dealt with Georgie Ann Macropolis also.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Georgie Ann was a good person. And it's like 10 years later, many years later, it's like I could hear their voices.
Yeah.
Georgie Ann, you'll confirm this. Georgie Ann always used to say, "Hi, honey," right?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And Nicole used to say, "I love you, Evan." Platonic. I was married. She was married. But, man, I miss her. She was awesome. And, a lot of them were friends. I mean, I booked them as an agent, but they became dear friends. And when Lanny died, the following New Year's Eve, as the ball went down, all I could think of was, I can't believe Lanny's dead. I was still like in shock, because he was very health conscious, and I started to say before, but the wear and tear of wrestling, and he took steroids for a while when he was getting his push. And people forget he had a main event. He did the whole circuit with Hogan, Madison Square Garden, everywhere.
Yeah.
He had a good run in WWF. He made money, but at the time, you don't know the toll that all of this takes on you. He also had moved to Ecuador. He was living in a condo on the beach in Ecuador, and he was having a good semi-retirement. He was still doing appearances. So he calls me up, says, "I'm coming to New York for a buddy's wedding. Can you get me a couple of bookings?" I said, "Sure, Lanny, whatever, no problem." And then he calls me back a few days before, and he says, you must know Bobby Rydell also, another
Absolutely,
agent.
Yeah.
Everybody knows everybody in this business. Yeah. So Bobby Rydell books him, and he says, "Evan, I don't want to run myself ragged. I don't, don't worry about booking me." So I thank God, and I'm not even religious, that I didn't book him, because he would have died on my couch. He would have died on my couch. Because whenever I booked him, he slept by us. My wife would make him Korean soup, and he felt very at home here. So imagine the trauma. Your friend dies on your couch. Oh my God.
Right.
So yeah. So I write about all of them in my book, and also at prowrestlingstories.com. And you know, wrestling journalism is a strange beast. It's like a bombardment of information, facts, title histories. I don't do that. What I do is, like we're doing right here, describe them as people. Who were they, and what they meant to you, and the friendship. You could Google any title history. That doesn't make you a genius writer.
Yeah.
The guy's buried in microfiche pulling out results. That doesn't make you a writer. If somebody can make you cry, that's a writer. And
I think it's important that the stories get out there and that people know what these people were like. And that's why I do these interviews. I think everybody should tell their story. And sure, maybe somebody has heard the name Evan Ginzburg, but doesn't know, who that is, or can't put a real life story to it. And now, watching something like this, oh, okay, this is Evan Ginzburg. And, you get to hear all of your experiences and hear about other people. And I think that's really, really important.
Thank you. I'll tell you a 30-second quick funny story, since some of what I said leaned dark. So it's 9/11, but it's 2003, 2 years after. And I booked Johnny Valiant for a convention in Philly. So we're about to board this little puddle jumper, 20-seater from Philly to New York. And it's 9/11. And it's still fresh on everybody's mind because it's 2 years to the day. And the pilot looks like a heel villain. He looked like Lee Van Cleef, if you're old enough to remember the actor Lee Van Cleef. He looked rough, this guy. He didn't look like your typical, GQ pilot.
Yeah.
So Johnny's looking at me, and I'm looking at Johnny, and he whispers, he said, "You see this guy? You see this guy? Like, are we getting on this plane? Is this guy going to take it into the ocean?" So we're on this plane. And all of a sudden, these little planes, you feel the turbulence, So now we're really thinking we're going down. We're going down into the ocean. So obviously we didn't. But yeah, man, being on the road with these guys, you have some funny experiences, some great experiences. One night, Lanny Poffo is wrestling Jay Lethal. And Jay Lethal was doing the Macho Man gimmick. So the promoter worked something out where they were having a little feud or whatnot. And right before the match, Lanny hands me his wallet because he's about to wrestle. He says, "Watch this for me." That says a lot in wrestling, because I wouldn't leave my wallet on a table with a lot of promoters.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, you're going up and down these highways, up and down these roads with people. And some of them you really, love them like brothers, sisters. Yeah. I tell people I have a love-hate relationship with everything wrestling. And I've told you both sides of it today.
Yeah. I have like a two-part question for you.
Sure.
What your greatest challenge has been being in the wrestling industry, and then on the flip side of that, what's the most rewarding part of it been for you?
The greatest challenge is wrestling is a business of extremes. You meet these incredible, wonderful, eclectic, talented people. So, for example, when my mother passed, Nikolai called me with condolences. Jimmy Valiant called me. Lanny Poffo called me. Johnny Valiant called me. And it was a boost when you're at your lowest, okay? But what's the other side of it? Like I said before, you have promoters who are trying to stiff these legends or lowball these legends, or lower the price at the last second, or you're chasing them down for your money at the end of the night after they did their part. No longer young, traveling to the venue,
Yeah.
and you go, I wouldn't piss on this guy if he was on fire. This guy's scum of the earth. I have to chase this guy down for a couple of $100, for a legend,
Right.
And it happened many times, so it's not that it's just an off, time. And so when you meet honorable promoters like yourself, it's that makes it easy. It's so that's the challenge, really. And then you get, anything I've ever done creatively, whether it's written or film or TV or radio, you just pour your heart into it and you do your best and you try to be honest and bare your soul. And there's always people that will hate you for it, literally hate you for it.
Yeah.
Because like before, I was critical of WWE, and I won't even mention names. There's podcasters who publicly say, WWE is my religion. Vince is my hero. Vince is a great American. So what's the end result of that? They'll just trash me endlessly. So one time, Sabu was going for a hip replacement, as I said earlier, and Melissa Coates was his girlfriend. And Melissa Coates was at my wedding, and she's a dear friend of mine. And she's like, Evan, help us promote this thing, help us get the word out. Which I've done publicity for conventions and such. I said, sure, I'm happy to. So all of a sudden, guys are turning on me. It's a scam. I go, it's not a scam. The guy needs a hip replacement. He's getting a hip replacement. He had a hip replacement. The scars were there. There was no. So you're trying. You're devoting your time and energy to help somebody, and people are attacking you for helping the person. It's like no good deed goes unpunished in the wrestling business.
Right.
So yeah, that's the challenge. There are great people and there are dirtbags, absolute dirtbags.
Yeah.
What was the other question? I forgot already.
Well, the flip side of that, just what's the most rewarding thing been for you being in the industry?
The most rewarding thing has been the friendships, the places you never would have gone otherwise, the experiences. I've been to wrestling events in England. I've been to wrestling events all over the country. That there's conventions everywhere. We've been pretty much everywhere, and what's my motivation otherwise to go to some of these places? It was wrestling. It was a convention. It was, an appearance. It was, and of course the experiences. We've had people say 350 Days was the best wrestling documentary they ever saw. And that's meaningful when you devote 6 years to something. Yeah. It's all subjective. I mean, Beyond the Mat was excellent. Wrestling with Shadows was excellent. There's no right or wrong answer, but for people to make a film, and again, you're not going to get rich off of it. For people to cherish it and for it to be meaningful to them. And here's another thing. When you write books or make movies, you're preserving these people forever. Look at 350 Days. Orndorff is gone. Snooker is gone. Nikolai, Lanny. Half the cast is gone. Yeah. Half the cast. The Wolfman, Larry Sharp. I'm doing this off the top of my head. There's like 40 wrestlers in there. But King Kong Musk is gone. I mean, you go up and down that cast list. Every second guy is gone. Butcher Paul Vachon, another lovely guy, wonderful guy. Yeah, Butcher Paul Vachon. Here's another thing, a pet peeve of mine. He's telling me he was in India. He wrestled in front of 100,000 people. 100,000 people. Okay, and the Vachons, him and Mad Dog, were also one of, if not the top tag team in the world. But you're going back to the 60s now, not even the 70s, the 60s. So early 70s, late 60s, whatever. So then late career, I saw Butcher Paul Vachon wrestle Bruno headlining. I saw Butcher Paul Vachon wrestle Andre headlining. But go to the mid 80s and they're jobbing him out, so you have a whole generation of wrestlers rewriting history and going, this guy was, quote, just a jobber, which is totally untrue.
Yeah.
And it's derogatory because they're playing an important role also.
Right.
Baron Cicluna headlined Madison Square Garden against Bruno. Baron Cicluna headlined all over the world. You could look, all these guys, Rene Goulet, pull up title histories of these guys. You'll be shocked. All the territories. Tag champ. Baron Cicluna was a WWF tag champ early on with King Curtis. Cicluna and Curtis, early 70s when I started watching. So you can't go. He was just a jobber.
Right.
And here's the irony of all of it. Some of these guys were better wrestlers when they were, quote unquote, jobbing than the main event guys. Johnny Rodz could out-wrestle 95% of the guys on any given card. I saw Johnny Rodz wrestle Billy Robinson at the Garden. It was like a clinic. I saw Johnny Rodz wrestle Fujinami for the junior heavyweight title. It was phenomenal. It was as great a match. It was so great you were convinced Johnny was going to win. You like lose your. So Johnny Rodz headlined in L.A. Johnny Rodz was a tag champ and headlined in Puerto Rico, etc. So on. You can't do the just the jobber thing because it's not even true.
Right. Yeah.
So all of these guys. So when you talk about bad things in the business, a lot of people diminish these guys. And this really gets me crazy. So there's a GoFundMe for a legend, a pioneer. The guy needs to pay his hospital bills. The guy needs to, when I say the guy, this is dozens and dozens of legends over the years. I'm not naming anybody specifically. The guy needs to save his house. The guy needs to get buried. They don't have money for a burial. Burials are $15,000 today. Not everybody has it. Okay? So the fans they all pissed away fortunes on wine, women, and song. I go, you have no clue what you're talking about. Most of these guys never broke $100,000. Most of them. Some pissed away money, but some pissed away fortunes. But when you say all of them pissed away fortunes, that's misinformation. You're just plain wrong. And, you got 3, 4, 5 figures for a WWE ticket or merch or whatever, but you don't have $5 to throw in the till for a legend in need. You're not a super fan. You're a money mark. I'm sorry. So at bare minimum, if you don't want to give, don't publicly criticize the guy or the GoFundMe. Some of these guys, it's a scam. Don't give. It's like you want to strangle them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because it's not a scam.
Right.
Orndorff's house was saved. Kamala's house was saved. And other guys, top guys who didn't make what they should have. And again, it's two lifestyles. You're on the road and you're supporting your family back home.
Right.
It doesn't come cheap. Yeah. And it's a little different today. They're wrestling less. They're making more of the big stars. Yeah. If somebody making $4 million a year pissed it away, that's on them. But these guys weren't making that. Believe me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward, in closing, Evan, fast forward years from now, looking back at your career as a whole and all of your involvement, how do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a writer, not as a wrestling journalist,
Mhm.
as a writer. Because my book, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets, there's 100 stories. About 40 are wrestling related. The others, it's juggling careers. I tell the story of making the wrestler. I tell the story of being a school teacher, the good, the bad, and ugly of that. There are 100 little vignettes, different stories. So, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to appreciate it. I want to be thought of as a filmmaker, not as a guy pumping out wrestling content. The wrestler was special. 350 Days was special. We did a film called Wrestling Then and Now. We shot it on like $1,000. It's not high art, but it's from the heart.
Sure.
It's from the heart. So you want to create things that move people, that touch people, not just the bombardment of facts, stats, minutia. The world doesn't need another shoot interview. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
You want to create something that will explore the human condition. Like like I was saying before, these wrestlers who became friends, somebody like Killer Kowalski, the stories this man could tell. He wrestled a guy, and the guy died during the match.
Mm.
The trauma, Killer Kowalski worked his entire life, and his financial guy took his money and went overseas. Just took it.
It's terrible.
Okay? So, if I did a movie on Killer Kowalski, it would be about the man, not just he won the title on this day. It's every WWE documentary, it leads up to WrestleMania or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's shoot higher for who were they and what did they sacrifice? At the end, Kowalski was so arthritis ridden, it was hard for him to get out of the chair. This is what he sacrificed to entertain us. This would be part of the story, not just he won this belt, he lost that belt. There's a human being behind all of this.
Sure.
And I'll tell you something interesting. The guy from Dawson's Creek just passed.
Right.
And one of the women wrestlers from WWE was a dear friend of his. Did you see this in the media?
Stacy Keibler?
Stacy Keibler, yes. So Stacy Keibler is talking about her friend who just passed. And it was so heartfelt, it was so moving that I said to myself, I would have been far more interested in her wrestling career if they presented her as a person instead of a cartoon character, sex object, whatever the case may be.
Mm.
Like Gordon Soley, as an announcer for Florida Championship Wrestling and Georgia Championship Wrestling, he would give you the backstory on these guys. This wrestler's father was a POW in Vietnam. Stories like this.
Yeah.
And it made you more interested in them as athletes, as people, as opposed to cartoon characters. you see a WWE women's match now. You have the 38 hair colors and the 17 different, gaudy colors in the outfit, and they're shooting mist. And I'm like, I'd be much more interested if they were presented as serious athletes and contenders, like in the UFC or boxing or whatever the case may be. And I think a lot of that is lost in pro wrestling. So I want to have a body of work that, it transcends wrestling, without, sounding, I love wrestling. Don't get me wrong. Vince McMahon didn't like to use the word wrestling. He was ashamed of wrestling, sports entertainment. I love wrestling. To me, they're wrestlers. They're not sports entertainers. They're athletes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you want to do quality work that you leave behind, because we're all going to go at some point. Leave you on that happy note. Yeah, and if I could leave great books that happen to be about, some of which happen to be about wrestling, great. If you could do great movies, great documentaries that happen to be about wrestling, great. But to just bombard people with minutia, you got guys who could tell you every match on every WWE pay-per-view. That doesn't interest me whatsoever.
Right.
Whatsoever. Yeah.
It's all about the individuals. It means a lot. It does. So, basically, I encourage all the fans that are tuning in now, to this, make sure to pick it up, get a copy, go to Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Yeah, Amazon, yeah.
Wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets. Evan Ginzburg, his latest project. Check it out, pick it up, support it. And we thank you so much, Evan, for taking the time today and being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed talking to you, and anytime.
Love to have you back for part 2 down the line. Absolutely.
I could do 10 parts. I've been around this 50 years.
Yes. For Evan Ginzburg, I'm Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave your comments. We'd love to hear from you, the fans, what you thought of this episode and what you'd like to see moving forward. And we will see you all next time.